Wheelchairs belong at home, not in public. The man's voice sliced through the diner like broken glass. Then, without warning, one of them grabbed the handles of her chair and shoved hard. Carla Jennings hit the floor. Coffee splashed across her lap. Her prosthetic leg twisted beneath her. Her wallet flew open. A worn photograph. Her in dress blue, standing tall beside her unit, drifted to the ground like a flag falling in slow motion. No one moved. No one helped. Forks froze midair. Conversations died mid-sentence. Just laughter from a corner booth and the sound of Carla dragging herself back up alone. But 30 minutes later, a military Humvee growled to a stop outside. 3 Marines stepped inside the diner. Not a word was spoken. Yet their presence said everything. Carla Jennings was born in the quiet town of Shawnee, Oklahoma, the kind of place where the summer air smelled like dry earth and fried catfish, and people still waved from their porches. Her father ran a small auto repair shop, and her mother worked nights at the county hospital. Life was modest, steady, and ordinary until September 11th, 2001. Her older brother Nathan had enlisted right after high school. He was her hero, funny, fearless, and always looking out for her, especially when school bullies mocked her for being quiet or too serious. When the towers fell, Nathan was already serving overseas. He never came back. Carla was only 18 when a folded flag was placed in her mother's trembling hands. That moment carved a permanent line through Carla's life. Within 6 months, she walked into a recruitment office and joined the United States Marine Corps, not out of anger, but purpose. She wanted to serve the country that her brother had believed in. She wanted to honor him, not with flowers on a grave, but by standing where he once stood. Her deployments took her through the dust-choked roads of Helmand Province, Afghanistan, where every sunrise was a borrowed blessing. She rose through the ranks with quiet determination, gaining the respect of her unit, not through loud commands, but by never backing down when it counted. But one afternoon, convoy changed everything. An IED buried beneath the road exploded beneath her vehicle, killing 2 Marines and shredding her left leg. Recovery was grueling, the pain was constant, but worse was the silence that followed. No more briefings, no more boots in sand, just hospital walls and endless therapy. Carla had survived war, but now she faced a different battle. PTSD survivors, guilt, and learning to walk with a prosthetic leg. After her discharge, she left Oklahoma behind. The memories were too sharp. Montana, with its wide-open sky and quiet towns, offered space to breathe. She found a part-time job at a diner called the Welcome Home Fitting, in an ironic way, folding napkins, pouring coffee, wiping down tables. It gave her structure, a rhythm, something to do with her hands when the memories got loud. And for a while, that was enough. The Welcome Home Diner wasn't much to look at, a squat little building with chipped paint and a neon sign that flickered more than it glowed. But to Carla Jennings, it was sanctuary. She started working there 3 days a week, weekdays, only mornings mostly. She didn't need the money. Her veterans benefits covered the basics. What she needed was something else. Structure, purpose, a place where the world still made sense, even if it was just refilling sugar jars and stacking coffee mugs. Mike, the owner, hired her without hesitation. He was a Vietnam vet who walked with a limp and said very little except when it mattered. He didn't ask questions about the prosthetic, didn't look at her with pity. When he shook her hand that first day, it was just that, a handshake. Equal, respectful, and in that simple gesture, Carla felt something rare dignity. Her days followed a rhythm that steadied her. She'd arrived before dawn when the sky was still bruised with night. She unlocked the doors, turned on the lights, and moved through the quiet kitchen like a soldier prepping for inspection. Chairs down, coffee on blinds raised, everything in order. The regulars came in like clockwork, old ranchers with weathered faces, truckers passing through a local school teacher who always asked for extra crispy bacon. Most didn't know her name. Some nodded. A few said, "Thank you," without really looking at her. That was fine by Carla. She didn't need attention. She needed peace. There was something comforting about the clatter of dishes, the low hum of the fridge, the sound of forks tapping plates. After the chaos of war, these were the sounds of safety. But not everyone who came through the door that brought peace. There were times rare but real when someone would glance at her leg and make a comment under their breath, or worse, loudly. Usually she ignored it. Marines are trained to pick their battles, and Carla had no interest in fighting for pride in a diner booth. Still, it stung. Not because it made her feel weak, but because it reminded her that to some people, her sacrifice looked like a burden instead of a badge. She stayed because the diner gave her rhythm, a place to serve again, quietly, humbly, and on her own terms. It was just after lunch rush on a Thursday when the doorbell jingled harder than usual, loud, aggressive, like someone had yanked it open more to make a point than to come inside. Carla didn't look up right away. She was clearing table 6, stacking dishes with practiced efficiency. But she heard them. 4 men, loud, drunk. The kind of laughter that fills a room before it earns it. They smelled like cheap whiskey and old cigarettes, their boots heavy on the tile. Her stomach tightened before her eyes even found them. Derek Slater. She remembered him from a few years back. Dishonorably discharged, everyone in town had heard. Started bar fights, got run out of the VFW for mouthing off to a retired colonel. He wore a camo jacket like it earned him a pass, but his eyes held no weight, only ego. He strutted in with 3 buddies, all louder than necessary. "Well, well," Derek said, his voice oozing mockery. "If it isn't the half-Marine." Carla kept her gaze down, wiping the table in small circles, breathing through her nose. Inhale, hold, exhale. She had nothing to prove to this man. She's still serving food, thought the health department had rules about defective hands. A few patrons glanced over, then quickly away. The atmosphere shifted. No one said a word. Brittany, the young waitress behind the counter, froze mid-pour. Carla straightened and moved toward them with a notepad. "Can I get you gentlemen something to drink?" she asked evenly. Derek sprawled into the booth like he owned the place, stretching out as if trying to occupy every inch of space. "Sure thing, Wheels. Roll on over." His buddies laughed, not because it was funny, but because cruelty often needs company. As she turned, Derek leaned toward his friends and said loudly, "Bet she got that leg blown off filing papers in the green zone. Real combat hero. That one dug deeper than she expected." But Carla didn't stop, didn't flinch. She placed the menus on their table with precision. "Today's special is meatloaf," she said, voice flat. "Perfect," Derek replied. "It matches the company." Soft and full of leftovers. The laughter echoed, bouncing off the walls while Carla rolled away, dignity intact. But something inside her beginning to smolder. Carla had dealt with worse. In the desert, the enemy didn't yell insults. They used silence, roadside traps, and the kind of hatred that didn't need words. So Derek Slater's nonsense. It was noise, annoying, yes, but survivable until it wasn't. She was clearing a nearby table when Derek's voice dropped low. That theatrical whisper meant for the whole diner to hear. "You know what I don't get?" he slurred, sipping his beer. "How the Marines ever let women in, let alone ones who come back missing parts." Laughter. Mean, choking laughter. His friends slapped the table like they were watching stand-up. Carla wheeled past them, not making eye contact. Her jaw locked so tight it ached. Then came the moment that broke the air like glass. As she turned to head back to the kitchen, one of Derek's friends, a bulky man with patchy facial hair and the smell of stale sweat, stood up behind her. "We're talking to you, soldier girl," he sneered. Carla didn't turn around. That's when he grabbed her wheelchair handles without warning, without permission, and shoved. The world spun sideways. Her chair slammed into the edge of a table and tipped. Hot coffee from a nearby mug splashed across her shirt and lap. Her prosthetic leg twisted unnaturally beneath her as her shoulder hit the ground hard. Her wallet burst open. Her phone slid one way. A faded photograph, the one she always kept tucked behind her ID, fluttered to the floor. Silence. The entire diner froze. Forks hovered in midair. Brittany, behind the counter, gasped but didn't move. Mike, the owner, stepped forward, then stopped. No one did anything. No one helped. Carla lay there for a moment, coffee burning her thigh, her side throbbing, the cold tiles pressing against her palms. Her chest rose and fell with the kind of controlled breath only a combat veteran truly knows. Then she moved. With slow, deliberate effort, she pushed herself upright. Her arms lean and strong from years of lifting what her legs could no longer support, braced against the floor. Her face didn't flinch. Not once. Even as her fingers reached for the photo now, face down on the tile, she kept her composure. No tears, no shouting, just the sound of her dignity scraping itself back off the floor alone. From the far side of the diner, a pair of wide, innocent eyes watched everything unfold. 8-year-old Eli Harper sat frozen in his booth, a half-eaten grilled cheese on his plate, and a chocolate milk sweating beside it. He hadn't said a word since Carla hit the floor. His hands were balled into fists on the edge of the table, knuckles white. Beside him sat his parents, his mother still stunned into silence, and his father, Major Daniel Harper, staring at Carla with a clenched jaw and a look that said, this moment had cut deeper than most would ever know. Eli tugged his father's sleeve. Dad, was she a soldier too? Like you. Daniel didn't answer right away. His eyes moved from Carla, now upright, silently brushing coffee from her clothes to the prosthetic leg to the fallen photo she had just picked up and tucked back into her wallet with practiced hands. He saw the emblem on her jacket, the worn but still distinct Marine Corps insignia. Yes, he finally said, his voice tight with something unspoken. From the looks of it, a real one. Then he stood. He didn't shout, didn't make a scene, just calmly placed his napkin beside his plate, pulled out his phone and walked toward the exit with steady, purposeful steps. Outside, the sun was just beginning to lower on the Montana horizon, casting a soft gold over the street. Daniel pressed his phone to his ear. Hey, he said, it's Harper. Yeah, I need a favor. His voice was low, but the urgency in his tone was unmistakable. I'm at a place called the Welcome Home Diner. One of ours is here. Carla Jennings, Staff Sergeant, Marine Corps. I just watched something happen that shouldn't have. Yeah, she's okay, but it's bad and she didn't deserve it. He paused. She didn't say a word. That's why I'm calling, because someone should. He hung up, stared at the fading light for a moment, then turned and walked back inside. His son looked up at him hopefully. Daniel gave a nod, not the kind you give a child to reassure them, but the kind you give before something important begins, and something had just begun. The quiet returned to the diner, but it was no longer the kind of quiet that brought comfort. It was the heavy, suffocating kind. The silence that lingers after something wrong has happened, and everyone pretends not to see it. Carla sat back in her wheelchair at her usual corner table, her damp clothes clinging to her skin, her prosthetic still twisted slightly. She didn't bother fixing it. She just stared out the window, hands resting in her lap. The same photo tucked safely back in her wallet. The laughter from Derek's booth had died down, but their smug glances still floated across the room like smoke. Then the air shifted. A low, rumbling growl echoed outside, growing louder, more defined the sound of something built for desserts, not diners. Every head turned toward the window as a military Humvee, tan and dust-worn, pulled up directly in front of the Welcome Home Diner. It didn't park. It stopped with purpose. The engine cut, the door opened, and then they stepped in. 3 Marines. The first was a barrel-chested gunnery sergeant, tall and graying with a slight limp in a polished oak cane tapping rhythmically against the floor. Behind him, a younger sergeant, clean-cut, steady, pushed an empty wheelchair. The last to enter was a female captain, her uniform adorned with medals that spoke of foreign wars and faraway battles. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The weight of their presence alone swept through the diner like a tidal wave. Conversations stopped. Forks dropped. Brittany behind the counter froze her hand, trembling over the coffee pot. The 3 Marines moved in unison straight toward Carla's corner table. The gunnery sergeant came to a stop and stood tall, squaring his shoulders. Despite his limp, he snapped into a crisp salute, the kind that came from decades of service and discipline. Staff Sergeant Jennings, he said firmly. Forgive our delayed response, ma'am. Carla blinked, stunned, but her training took over. Her spine straightened. Her hand rose automatically to return the salute, shaky but precise. At ease, Gunnery Sergeant Martinez, she replied, her voice clearer than it had been in weeks. In that moment, something changed in the room. The strength she had carried alone was now reflected back at her multiplied. The Marines had come, and this time she didn't have to stand alone. The diner was frozen, not with fear, but with awe. No one moved as the three Marines stood beside Carla's table uniforms, pressed boots planted like pillars of something far older than military protocol. It wasn't just presence, it was purpose. Captain Leah Simmons broke the silence, her voice calm, but sharp enough to cut through the tension. Her eyes swept the room slowly, deliberately, until they landed squarely on Derek Slater and his crew. "We received a call," she said, "from a fellow officer who witnessed a decorated combat veteran in a wheelchair assaulted by civilians. We're here in response." The weight of the words settled like lead at Derek's booth. Laughter had evaporated. The man who had shoved Carla now sat stiff, staring down at the condensation on his drink. Derek's jaw tightened, but for once no words came. The arrogance drained from his face as quickly as it had filled the room earlier. Gunnery Sergeant Martinez turned back to Carla. "With all due respect, Staff Sergeant, what happened here is not nothing. It's not just disrespect, it's dishonor." From the back corner of the diner movement, an elderly man with a Korean War veteran cap stood slowly, his back straightening as if pulled by memory. Beside him, a middle-aged woman with an Air Force pin on her lapel rose from her stool face, solemn. Then, without a word, three men in civilian clothes, their posture and bearing unmistakably military, stood from another table. National Guard, perhaps, or veterans who hadn't worn their service on their sleeves until now. They all stood at attention, and then came the voice. Attention, barked Major Daniel Harper, returning from outside, still in his civilian clothes, but carrying himself like he never left the service. Half the diner rose. Old, young, retired, active civilians followed suit, moved not by obligation, but by something older respect. Carla's eyes widened, not with fear, not even surprise, but with something deeper, something like homecoming. For the first time in years, she wasn't the only one standing for something. As the last patron rose to stand in silent respect, Carla felt something loosen in her chest, something she hadn't even realized was tightly bound. She had walked, rolled, and stood through countless days of quiet endurance. But now, in this little roadside diner in Montana, surrounded by strangers turned witnesses and Marines turned family, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Relief. Captain Simmons gave a small nod toward the waitress. 4 coffees black. Brittany, still wide-eyed but composed, rushed to fulfill the order. Her hands moved quickly now, not out of fear, but respect. The 3 Marines sat down at Carla's corner table as if they had done it 100 times before. Gunnery Sergeant Martinez leaned his cane against the booth and folded his hands. Sergeant O'Connor parked the spare wheelchair just beside Carla's and gave her a respectful smile. "Brother, in case you wanted options," he said lightly. Carla almost smiled. They talk like Marines do, not about medals or pain, but about shared sandstorms, bad rations, and the ridiculous things that only made sense when everything around you was falling apart. They laughed just a little. They spoke in short orthand the way only those who've served together truly can. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was just real. And for Carla, that was everything. Remember, Helman Martinez said, "When the convoy took a wrong turn and you rerouted us using the stars." Carla smirked faintly. "Stars and stubbornness kept us alive," O'Connor said. "And that's a fact." Captain Simmons leaned in slightly. "You didn't just serve, you led. That matters." Carla looked down at her coffee steam curling into the air. "That life's behind me." "With respect," Simmons said gently. "The Corps never leaves you behind, and it never forgets." Around them, the diner slowly returned to motion. Plates clinked again. The murmur of conversation resumed. But it wasn't the same. People weren't looking at Carla with pity anymore. They were looking at her with pride. And at the booth where Derek Slater sat, not a single word was spoken. Not another laugh, just a deep, uncomfortable silence. Carla sipped her coffee. It tasted like strength. 1 week later, something changed at the Welcome Home diner. It wasn't announced. No press, no ceremony, just a quiet morning where instead of flickering, the old neon sign out front had been replaced. Now, in bold hand-painted letters, it read, "Diner of the Brave. Every soldier has a place here." The change wasn't just cosmetic, it was cultural. Inside, the booths were the same. The coffee still a little too strong, the bacon still crisp to perfection. But there was something new on the far wall, a veteran's wall of honor. Dozens of framed photographs had appeared, each showing someone who had served men and women, young and old, in every branch of the military. Beneath each photo was a simple inscription, name, rank, and years of service. At Carla's usual corner booth, a small brass plaque had been permanently affixed to the table. It read, "Reserved for veterans in honor of Staff Sergeant Carla Jennings." She didn't ask for it, didn't even know about it until she rolled in that morning and saw it for herself. For a moment, she just stared at it, unsure whether to cry or laugh. Then she quietly placed her coffee down, touched the edge of the plaque, and nodded to no one in particular. From that day forward, something beautiful happened. Veterans who had once passed through town without a word began stopping by. Some were older Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm wearing hats with worn patches and stories they never shared. Others were young, freshly returned, still looking for a place where they weren't just uniforms, but human. They found it at that booth. And Carla Shea kept coming in for her shifts. Still folded napkins, still poured coffee. But now she wore her Marine Corps pin openly, not to boast, but to say, "You're not alone." Even Rick Lawson, the manager who had once told staff to avoid trouble, changed. He started greeting every veteran personally, swapped his ball cap for a press shirt and a flag pin on his collar. He even started giving discounts to service members, not because someone told him to, but because it finally felt right. And the booth where Derek Slater and his friends had once mocked her, it stayed empty. No one sat there anymore, not out of fear, but out of respect. Because everyone in town now understood, you don't dishonor the brave, not here, not ever again. Carla never asked to be a symbol. She didn't want attention, and she certainly didn't seek admiration. But after that day, after the plaque, the salute, the wall of veterans, people started seeing her differently, and slowly so did she. It began quietly. One evening, a young soldier wandered into the diner just before closing. He wore the nerves of a first deployment shoulder, two stiff eyes darting like he did not know where to belong. He stood awkwardly at the entrance, holding his cap in both hands, clearly unsure if he should stay. Carla noticed. She always noticed. Rolling over, she looked up at him gently. "First time shipping out?" she asked. The young man nodded. "Grab a seat," she said, gesturing to her table. "Coffee's not bad, and the company's better." He sat grateful. They didn't talk much at first, just quiet sips and subtle nods. But something settled in the air, something calm. And when he left, he looked lighter, less alone. Word spread. Soon Carla's corner booth became something more than a table. It became a post, a place where young recruits came for grounding, older vets came for reflection, and civilians came to listen, really listen for the first time. One day, the local high school reached out. They were holding a Veterans Appreciation Week and wanted someone to speak. Carla almost said no. Public speaking wasn't her thing. She preferred action to words. But something tugged at her, so she said yes. When she stood before that auditorium of teenagers, she didn't talk about war. She talked about duty, discipline, and what it means to carry someone else's weight when they can't carry it alone. The uniform doesn't make you a Marine, she told them. It's what you do when no one's watching. It's standing back up when the world pushes you down. It's choosing to serve when you could walk away. Afterwards, students lined up to shake her hand. A few even asked how to enlist. And something inside Carla shifted again. The pain was still there. The scars, the memories, the limp she sometimes hid with humor. But now they had purpose. She was no longer just surviving. She was guiding, mentoring, belonging. And in doing so, Carla Jennings became more than a soldier, more than a survivor. She became a bridge between generations, between service and silence, between pain and pride. Not every hero wears their history on their sleeve. Some carry it in the quiet way. They show up every day, folding napkins, pouring coffee, pretending the limp doesn't hurt, pretending the silence doesn't echo. Carla Jennings never asked to be noticed. She never wanted applause. But when the world tried to knock her down and look away, She did what true strength always does. She got back up with grace, with grit, and with dignity. The events at the diner didn't just change Carla's life, they changed the town. They reminded everyone watching, from the waitress behind the counter to the boy holding his father's hand, that honor is not always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet resilience of someone who refuses to be broken. Carla's story isn't just about one woman in a diner. It's about something much bigger, a test of who we are when no one expects us to act. In today's fast-paced world, it's easy to look away, to assume someone else will speak up. But every time we stay silent in the face of disrespect, we allow it to grow louder. And every time we choose to stand up, even with a simple gesture, we remind the world that decency still matters. How many people do we pass each day carrying invisible burdens? A limp, a scar, a silence that says more than words ever could? Not all heroes want to be recognized, but all of them deserve to be respected. Here's a question we'd love to hear your thoughts on. Have you ever stood up for someone when it was uncomfortable? Or have you ever been the one left on the floor waiting for someone to care? Share your experience in the comments. You never know who it might inspire. If this story made you feel something, sadness, pride, anger, or hope, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story. And most importantly, if you believe respect should never depend on someone's appearance, comment the word respect below, because dignity should never go out of style, especially in a country built by those who served. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for remembering what truly matters.